The words hit me harder than any physical blow, slicing through the polite hum of Victor Harding's penthouse party. Sarah, she knows nothing and needs to remain in the dark. She's our perfect engine. My scotch glass slipped, cold sweat beating on my palms, as Victor's voice, smooth as always, sealed my wife's unwitting fate. He glanced my way, a fleeting, almost imperceptible smirk, before turning back to his call. The air in Victor Harding's penthouse was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and false bonhomie. I moved through the clusters of people like a shadow, a stranger in my own life, sipping a scotch I barely tasted. The glass felt heavy, solid. Victor's parties were always the same, a stage for him to parade his latest philanthropic endeavor. His guests a glittering backdrop of donors and social climbers. I felt the grit of my Midwestern boots on the polished marble floors, an unspoken discord. Sarah, though, she thrived in this environment, not for the superficiality, but for the platform. I saw her across the room, her red dress a vibrant splash against the muted tones of the other women. She was leaning forward, her eyes bright, animated, explaining the intricacies of her Clean Rivers project to a small circle of attentive faces. Her passion was genuine, a rushing current in a stagnant pond. It was what I loved about her, that fierce, unshakable belief in making things better. Victor, the foundation's benevolent face, floated nearby, his smile practiced, his charm a well-oiled machine. He was a showman, always. I had known that much for years, but never understood the full extent of his performance until tonight. I caught Sarah's eye as she took a brief pause. I gave her a small, tired shrug, mouthing, "Heading out." She nodded, a knowing smile playing on her lips. She understood my limits with these gatherings, my aversion to the polite fictions exchanged like currency. The chatter of the party faded slightly as I made my way towards the elevator, the noise a dull roar behind me. As I passed Victor's private study, a heavy oak door usually kept firmly shut, I noticed it was ajar, a sliver of light escaping into the dim hallway. Hushed voices drifted out, low and urgent, cutting through the background hum. Curiosity, or perhaps an instinct I hadn't yet named, pulled me closer. I paused, pretending to adjust my cufflink, the sound of my own breath suddenly loud in my ears. Victor Harding's voice, smooth and controlled, was unmistakable. He was on the phone. "Frank," he said, the name a familiar one, "we need to finalize this synergy deal by Friday." There was a pause, a rustle of papers, then Victor's voice again, lower this time, almost conspiratorial. That was when I heard it, a sentence that hit me like a blow to the gut, colder and sharper than the scotch I still held. "Sarah, she knows nothing and needs to remain in the dark. She's our perfect engine." The world seemed to tilt. The glass in my hand felt suddenly heavy, forgotten. The air left my lungs in a silent whoosh. Everything clicked into place with an awful, sickening precision. The small discrepancies I'd dismissed, the vague answers Victor had given when I'd pressed him on funding details, Sarah's innocent enthusiasm all snapped together. Sarah, my Sarah, was an unwitting pawn. She was a tool, a means to an end in Victor's elaborate, cold-hearted scheme. The perfect engine with no idea she was being driven by someone else's dirty fuel. A cold rage, quiet and deep, began to simmer in my gut. Victor, I thought, for all his practiced charm and cunning, had made a critical mistake. He assumed the engine had no brains, and perhaps, more importantly, no one to watch over it. He had underestimated the man who stood in the hallway listening. I tightened my grip on the scotch glass, then set it carefully on a passing waiter's tray. My movements were slow, deliberate, each step a conscious effort. I walked away from the study, away from the party, towards the elevator. The descent was quick, the silence a welcome relief after the cacophony upstairs. Outside, the cool night air bit at my cheeks. I hailed a passing taxi, the yellow light a beacon in the city night. "Where to, sir?" the driver asked, his voice gruff. I opened my mouth to say home, but the word caught. Home felt suddenly wrong, a place too vulnerable for the thoughts now swirling in my head. "My office," I said instead, the words firm, decisive. The driver nodded, shifting gears. The city lights blurred as we moved. This would require thought, planning. My approach, I resolved, had to be surgical, precise, and utterly devoid of emotion. The glow of the taxi's rear lights faded into the late-night street. It was past 11 when I unlocked the glass doors to Sterling Financial, the quiet hum of the building's systems, the only sound. Bob Miller, the grizzled night guard, looked up from his crossword puzzle, his eyes wide behind his spectacles. "Dale, didn't expect to see you this late," Bob said, his voice a low rumble. "Everything all right?" "Just a few loose ends, Bob," I replied, giving him a tight nod. "Might be here a while." He gave a sympathetic grunt, returning to his puzzle. The elevator ride to the 30th floor was silent, the kind of silence that amplifies your thoughts. My office was dark, the city lights painting geometric patterns on the floor. I dropped my briefcase on the polished mahogany and switched on the monitor. The screen flickered to life, bathing the room in a cool blue light. I logged into our company's secure financial database, a tool designed for mergers and acquisitions, for tracing complex money trails. Now it was repurposed. My fingers moved over the keyboard, searching for connections, for anything that would tie Victor Harding to something beyond his polished public image. I started with the Blue Earth Foundation, then Victor's personal finances, cross-referencing names, addresses, shell corporations. The hours bled into one another. By 2 in the morning, the preliminary sketch was grim. Money moved in circuitous routes. Donations appearing just before permits were granted. Contractors with dubious histories landing lucrative, untendered contracts. The patterns were faint, almost invisible to the casual observer. But under the scrutiny of my practiced eye, they began to coalesce. A cold wave of disgust settled over me. It was worse than I'd imagined. I finally pulled myself away from the screen as the first hint of dawn touched the skyline. When I got home, the house was dark, quiet. I found Sarah asleep, curled up in our bed. I showered, the hot water doing little to wash away the grim residue of my discovery. Later that morning, Sarah walked into the kitchen, a smile radiant on her face. "You won't believe it, Dale," she said, practically vibrating with excitement. "Mr. Schmidt just confirmed a $5 million donation for Clean Rivers. $5 million! This changes everything." She looked at me, her eyes shining with pure joy, the kind of untainted optimism that I usually cherished. I forced a smile, a physical effort that tightened the muscles in my jaw. "That's wonderful, honey," I managed, reaching for her hand. Her trust, her genuine belief in the goodness of this work, was a fragile thing. I knew with an agonizing certainty that I couldn't tell her yet. The truth would crush her, obliterate the very foundation of her passion. "You know," I said, trying to make my voice sound casual, "with all this new money, we should probably take a closer look at the foundation's reports. For transparency, and to make sure everything's buttoned up, for your protection." I watched her face, gauging her reaction. Sarah's brow furrowed slightly. "My protection? That's sudden. You usually leave the paperwork to me." She studied me for a moment, then her expression softened. "But you're right. More money means more scrutiny, and it's sweet of you to offer to help. I appreciate it." She leaned in and kissed my cheek. She saw care. I saw the first move in a war. For the next 2 weeks, my evenings were consumed by the Blue Earth Foundation's public reports. I burrowed through balance sheets, contractor lists, and project summaries, my office becoming a war room of spreadsheets and highlighted documents. The anomalies jumped out at me, stark against the facade of legitimate philanthropy. Construction contracts for riverbed clearing, bank stabilization, projects directly related to Sarah's initiative, were repeatedly awarded to the same few companies without any competitive bidding process listed. These companies, I found, were all significant donors to the Blue Earth Foundation. Even more damning were the timelines. Large donations, sometimes millions, appeared in the Foundation's records just weeks before those same donor companies received favorable environmental permits or zoning variances for their own unrelated projects. It was a clear pattern, a sophisticated quid pro quo disguised as charity. Then I found it, the direct link. Frank Dixon's Titan Minerals, a company infamous for its past pollution violations and hefty fines, now appeared as a major contractor for the Clean Rivers project. They were being paid handsomely to clean up rivers that their past operations had likely contributed to fouling. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. Victor, the champion of clean water, was using his foundation to launder the reputations and secure the future profits of polluters. The evidence was compelling, damning even. But I knew it wasn't enough to bring Victor down. Not yet. This was just the financial skeleton. I needed flesh and blood. I needed an entry point and something Victor would never expect. I needed a Trojan horse. My office, typically a place of strategic calculations and detached decisions, had quietly become a command center. Operation Transparency was the name I gave it in my head, a grim irony given the layers of deceit I was uncovering. By day, I navigated the familiar currents of venture capital, sitting through pitches, analyzing spreadsheets, making the kind of investments that kept Apex Ventures profitable. My tie was straight, my handshake firm, my expression unreadable. No one would have guessed the churning underneath. But when the office emptied and the city lights began to prickle the deepening twilight, the real work began. Nights and weekends disappeared into a blur of data. Coffee became my fuel, the glow of the monitor my only companion. Nancy Johnson, my assistant for 15 years, was too astute not to notice. She had seen me through countless deals, both triumphant and disastrous. One Tuesday morning, as she placed a steaming mug of coffee on my desk, her eyes narrowed. "You've got that look, Dale," she said, her voice quiet but knowing. "The one you get when you're taking something apart, piece by piece." I managed a tight smile. "Just a complex deal, Nancy. Nothing out of the ordinary." She just nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line, leaving me to my work. She didn't press, which was one of the many reasons I valued her. She understood that some battles were best fought in silence, and I was, indeed, taking something apart. Victor's empire was a sprawling, intricate web. Through the Foundation's public records, cross-referenced with corporate filings and lobbying disclosures, I began to map his influence. He wasn't just a philanthropist, he was a master puppeteer. His network stretched across corporate executives, city officials, and even other seemingly legitimate environmental nonprofits. The Blue Earth Foundation, I now saw with chilling clarity, was less a charity and more a central hub for influence trading, cleverly disguised as philanthropy. Dollars flowed in, disguised as goodwill, and favors flowed out, disguised as progress. The financial data I had was a strong foundation, but it was just the surface. To truly expose Victor, I needed more. I needed internal communications, emails, memos, meeting minutes. I needed concrete project details, the real costs versus the reported costs. I needed details on the bidding processes, or lack thereof, information that would lay bare the collusion. And that, I knew, was information I couldn't ask Sarah for. She was too close, too trusting, and too vulnerable. She was still the perfect engine running on clean fuel, oblivious to the toxic exhaust. My mind started sifting through past contacts, past projects, searching for an angle. I needed an insider, or at least someone with a reason to look closer. Then a name surfaced from the depths of my memory. Dr. Anna Davis, an engineer, brilliant and quietly driven. Her startup, Aqua Vitas, had pitched to Apex Ventures a couple of years ago. We had passed on it. Too niche, too early stage, the board had argued. Her water filtration technology, a revolutionary bio-nanotechnology system, had stuck with me, though. It was exactly the kind of innovative solution that the Blue Earth Foundation should have been championing, the kind that could genuinely make a difference in river cleanup. Instead, Victor was funneling money to companies like Titan Minerals, whose methods were antiquated, and whose profits often came at the environment's expense. The next morning, with a sense of quiet determination, I located Aqua Vitas' contact information. I dialed the number. A young man with a hesitant voice answered. "Aqua Vitas, how can I help you?" he asked. "My name is Dale Peterson," I said, my voice steady. "I'm with Apex Ventures. I'm looking for Dr. Davis. We met a couple of years ago." There was a slight pause. Oh yes, Apex Ventures. You passed on us, if I recall. The subtle accusation in his tone was clear. Circumstances change, I replied smoothly, a practiced detachment in my voice. And this isn't strictly about investment. Ariana Davis's office was sparse, practical, filled with the faint scent of ozone and the quiet hum of scientific equipment. She was just as I remembered her, direct, intelligent, her dark hair pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail. She regarded me with an analytical gaze, her arms crossed. Mr. Peterson, she began, I admit I'm curious. Apex Ventures usually doesn't circle back after a no, especially not for something not strictly about investment. I sat across from her, my hands resting calmly on the table. Dr. Davis, I understand your skepticism. Our initial assessment of Aqua Vitas was based purely on a venture capital model, high risk, long-term return. But I've had reason recently to reconsider the broader landscape where your technology fits. I leaned forward slightly, lowering my voice. Specifically, the Blue Earth Foundation. Her eyebrows lifted, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. I've been doing some informal observations, I continued, choosing my words carefully. My wife Sarah works there, as you know. I've noticed inefficiencies, a certain mismanagement of resources, the kind of setup where truly innovative, cost-effective solutions often get overlooked. I paused, letting that sink in. Your bio-nanotechnology, Dr. Davis, is revolutionary. It offers genuine, measurable impact for communities and real value. It's exactly what the foundation should be looking for if they were truly focused on their mission. Anna uncrossed her arms, a hint of something resembling frustration or perhaps resignation in her posture. Overlooked is an understatement, Mr. Peterson. We've pitched to countless organizations, big and small. They like the concept, the numbers, the potential. But then it's always the same. Too new, too disruptive to existing contracts, too much red tape. She shook her head. They prefer the established, often more expensive methods, the ones that keep everyone comfortable. Precisely, I said, a grim satisfaction settling in my chest. Comfortable perhaps, but not effective. That's where you come in. I leaned back again, making eye contact. I believe your technology deserves a chance to prove itself. And I believe the Blue Earth Foundation, for all its current flaws, could be that platform. You present Aqua Vitas to them. I can offer some consultation, help you navigate the bureaucracy, point you towards the right people, or rather, away from the wrong ones. I didn't spell out Victor's corruption. Not yet. It would be too much, too soon. Instead, I hinted at a more benign, though still frustrating, reality. There's a natural resistance to true innovation in any large organization, especially one dealing with public and donor funds. Old habits die hard. Existing relationships are entrenched. It will be a challenge, but your technology speaks for itself. Anna was quiet for a long moment, tapping her finger on the table. Her gaze was distant, as if she were picturing riverbeds clearing, water purifying. She was driven by impact, by the concrete results of her work. I saw the gears turning, the possibilities unfolding in her mind. This wasn't about money for her, not primarily. It was about seeing her life's work make a tangible difference. They'd never consider us on our own, she finally said, her voice soft. Not after we've been rejected so many times by so many of their associates. That's where Apex Ventures comes in, I replied. We're prepared to make a small, legitimate seed investment in Aqua Vitas, enough to give you some runway, provide credibility, and demonstrate that a reputable firm believes in your potential. Not a major acquisition, but a strong signal. It positions you differently. As a partner, not just another startup begging for a grant. She looked at me, a cautious hope entering her eyes. You think it could work? I think your technology is too important to be ignored, I said. And I think with a strategic approach, we can make them see that. She considered it, the weight of her frustration battling with the glimmer of a new opportunity. Finally, she nodded. All right, Mr. Peterson, I'll prepare a proposal for the foundation, and I'll take that investment for Aqua Vitas. A small, imperceptible shift in my posture. The first lock clicked into place. I had secured a crucial piece of my Trojan horse. Dr. Anna Davis was a whirlwind of focused energy. She worked tirelessly on her presentation for the Blue Earth Foundation, her enthusiasm for her technology infectious. I worked alongside her in the evenings, refining slides, honing her pitch. My guidance wasn't about flashy graphics. It was about stripping away the jargon and highlighting the cold, hard numbers. The dramatic cost savings her bio-nanotechnology offered compared to traditional methods, the superior efficiency, the measurable environmental impact. Victor understood profit and optics, and that was the language we would speak. Sarah, when she first saw Anna's preliminary slides, was genuinely moved. "This is it, Dale," she'd said, her voice filled with a hopeful reverence. "This is what Clean Rivers was always supposed to be. Real progress, real science." Her belief made my forced smile ache. It fueled the quiet fire within me. Knowing what she believed in was tainted. The pitch meeting was a sterile affair in one of the Foundation's polished boardrooms. Victor Harding sat at the head of the table, his smile affable, his eyes, however, constantly assessing. He was initially wary of a small startup. His empire was built on grand, established contracts. But Anna's presentation, stripped down to its core economic advantages, coupled with my subtle presence and implied endorsement from Apex Ventures, began to chip away at his resistance. I'd made sure to casually mention to a few influential donors that Apex was exploring innovative environmental tech. Victor, ever attuned to public perception, also saw the immediate PR value in championing something genuinely cutting edge. It looked good, sounded responsible, and promised to save money. In the end, Aqua Vitas was granted a pilot project. Sarah was ecstatic, hugging Anna with a genuine warmth that made my stomach churn. Anna, for her part, simply nodded, a quiet satisfaction in her eyes. The Trojan Horse was inside the gates. Anna began her work, quickly embedding herself within the Foundation's operations. She was the expert, the innovator, given access to internal systems, project specifications, and budgeting details to ensure seamless integration of her technology. Before she started, I provided her with a list. "Keep an eye on these efficiency metrics, Anna," I told her, handing her a printed sheet. "Where does the money really go after the initial grants? What are the timelines for procurement? Are the suppliers consistent across projects?" These weren't random questions. They were the precise data points I needed to build my case against Victor. Focused on the technical challenges, Anna initially saw only the bureaucratic hurdles. But as she dug deeper, comparing Foundation records to the reality on the ground, the irregularities started to surface. Budgeting allocations that didn't match actual expenditures, procurement orders for equipment that was never fully utilized, supply chains that looped through shell companies before reaching the project site. She started documenting these discrepancies, meticulously, dispassionately, sharing them with me through secure channels. Our late-night calls became routine, each one adding another brick to the wall of evidence. Sarah, meanwhile, remained utterly oblivious. She was thrilled by the visible progress Aqua Vitas was making in the pilot program, brimming with pride over Anna's dedication to the Clean Rivers project. I continued my role as a supportive husband, always offering to review her reports, a casual way to further embed myself in the information flow, to verify Anna's findings, and to ensure Sarah's own efforts weren't inadvertently compromising my investigation. The picture of Victor Harding and his systemic fraud was becoming clearer, sharper, and more damning with each passing day. The web was vast, intricate, but it was coming undone, thread by slow thread. Life's costly choices are often made in the quietest moments, under the guise of good intentions. Stick around to the end to see how they truly unfold. Anna's reports became increasingly grim. She'd been given access to the Blue Earth Foundation's core accounting software for the pilot project, and from there she was able to trace the deeper currents. "Dale," she'd said during one of our calls, her voice tight with professional indignation, "the invoices for the riverbed reinforcement contracts are inflated by at least 30%, and they're all going through the same 3 shell companies." My jaw tightened. "Can you trace those shell companies?" "Already did," she replied, her efficiency unwavering. "They all lead back to Frank Dixon, Titan Minerals, The same Frank Dixon whose company has been fined for pollution and is now somehow a major partner in Clean Rivers. The irony was bitter, palpable. Then a few days later, she found the true smoking gun. "Emails, Dale," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Between Victor and Dixon, discussing profit sharing on the construction contracts and personal transfers to Victor's offshore accounts. They're trained to bury it, but it's there. Get me everything you can," I instructed, my voice flat. "Every record, every transfer, irrefutable proof." While Anna meticulously gathered the digital paper trail, Sarah, oblivious to the storm brewing, started noticing her own shifts in the foundation. One evening as we sat at dinner, she frowned. "Victor's been different lately, stressed, more agitated in meetings, and he's been taking a lot of private calls. Seems less transparent, you know?" She picked at her food, a worried crease between her brows. "He snapped at me today about a budget question. He never does that." I saw my opening, a small crack in the dam. I mused, keeping my tone casual. "That's not like Victor. Maybe it's just the pressure of managing so much money. Sometimes with big foundations, things can get murky, a lot of moving parts. To protect everyone and the foundation's reputation, an independent audit might not be a bad idea." Sarah looked up, surprised. "An audit? Dale, that would cause such a fuss. Victor would hate it. He's always been so careful with the foundation's image." She dismissed the idea with a wave of her hand. "I'm sure it's just a rough patch. He's a good man. He means well." Her unwavering trust in Victor was a painful thing to witness. It reminded me again of the collateral damage this would inevitably cause. A few days later, Anna delivered. A small encrypted flash drive passed discreetly during a staged business lunch in a bustling downtown cafe. "It's all there," she said, her eyes meeting mine across the table. Kickbacks, inflated invoices, offshore transfers, his personal take from the Titan contracts. It's a mess. Back in my office, the drive plugged in, the files opened, the full picture solidified. The intricate web I'd been unraveling for weeks now lay exposed. Detailed records of illicit profits, shell companies funneling money directly to Victor Harding, explicit instructions from him to Dixon. It was all there, undeniable, enough to bring down his entire carefully constructed empire. The quiet triumph was quickly overshadowed by a different kind of weight. The public fallout would be immense, for the donors, for the foundation, for the thousands who believed in its mission. And then there was Sarah. Her face, animated with genuine passion, flashed in my mind. Her belief in Clean Rivers, in Victor's supposed benevolence, would be shattered. And I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that my role in this discovery, my deliberate deception, would shatter her trust in me too. It was a cost I had anticipated, but one I now felt with a crushing reality. I had to be surgical, not emotional. The best way to expose Victor, to ensure maximum impact and minimum ability for him to control the narrative, was through an anonymous leak. A trusted financial journalist, someone who understood the intricacies of corporate malfeasance, someone who would ask the right questions and pursue the truth without fear. The dossier was a thick binder filled with printouts of emails, financial transfer records, bank statements, and annotated spreadsheets. Each page was a nail in Victor Harding's coffin. I'd spent days meticulously organizing it, ensuring every piece of evidence was cross-referenced, airtight. It was an anonymous package sent via courier to Catherine Vance, a financial journalist whose reputation for unearthing corporate malfeasance was legendary. Her office was in a city hundreds of miles away. Distance was a good insulator. The waiting began. The silence was punctuated by the subtle hum of the world. Then whispers started to circulate, not in public, not yet, but through the tight-knit circles of the foundation's major donors, through back channels in the financial district. Victor, feeling the walls close in, became a ghost of his former self. His practiced charm frayed, replaced by a raw, agitated paranoia. He barked orders, snapped at staff, and held frantic, hushed meetings behind closed doors. The polished facade was cracking. Sarah was deeply troubled. She came home most nights with a bewildered expression, recounting scenes of increasing tension. "He's like a different man, Dale," she'd said, pacing our living room. "He's accusing people of disloyalty, talking about internal leaks. It's unsettling." She had heard the rumors too, vague hints of financial irregularities, but clung to her belief in the Foundation's mission. She confronted Victor, looking for answers, for reassurance. He, of course, vehemently dismissed the whispers as baseless attacks from envious rivals, a smear campaign designed to undermine their good work. Sarah, bless her unwavering belief, wanted to believe him. Then one Tuesday morning, it broke. I was at my desk, the usual cacophony of the trading floor a distant drone. My phone buzzed with an alert. The business ledger. Philanthropic empire exposed. Harding Foundation a front for fraud. The headline screamed. My breath hitched. I clicked the link, the words burning themselves into my retina. Catherine Vance hadn't pulled any punches. The article was a devastating expose, laying bare Victor Harding's carefully constructed philanthropic empire as nothing more than a front for systematic corruption. It detailed the Titan Minerals deal, the intricate web of shell companies, the inflated invoices, and the flagrant misuse of charitable donations, all backed by my meticulously compiled evidence. It linked Victor directly to personal financial gain, offshore accounts, and a shocking betrayal of public trust. A small paragraph buried deeper mentioned Sarah. Ms. Miller, a passionate environmentalist, appears to have been an unwitting figurehead in the Clean Rivers Project, her genuine dedication tragically exploited by the very man she trusted. Unwitting figurehead. The words echoed, cold and clinical. My phone rang. It was Sarah. Her voice, usually steady and calm, was trembling, ragged. "Dale," she choked out, Have you seen the news?" There was a pause, a ragged intake of breath. I just read it. Is it true?" Her question was raw, desperate. "Sarah," I started, but she cut me off, her voice rising, sharp with the pain I had inflicted. "You knew, didn't you? All this time you knew. You knew about Victor. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me walk into this?" The questions came in a torrent, accusations mingled with heartbreak. I closed my eyes, a wave of exhaustion washing over me. There was no more hiding. "Come home, Sarah," I said, my voice low but firm. "I'll tell you everything, from the beginning." When she arrived, her face was pale, tear-streaked. Her eyes, usually so bright with purpose, were hollow. She collapsed onto the sofa, the newspaper crumpled in her hand. I sat opposite her, and I began. From the moment I'd overheard Victor's call in the penthouse hallway, the chilling phrase "perfect engine," to the quiet investigation, to Anna Davis, to the evidence, to the anonymous leak. I laid it all bare, every painful detail. She listened in silence, her gaze fixed on something beyond me. When I finished, the quiet in the room was deafening. She finally looked at me, her eyes filled with a profound, aching betrayal. From Victor, yes, an immense, world-shattering betrayal, but beneath that, a quiet, almost imperceptible betrayal from me. My deception, however well-intentioned, had wounded her deeply. The aftermath was swift, brutal, and utterly chaotic. Within days of Catherine Vance's article hitting the stands, Victor Harding was arrested. The news channels played endless loops of him being led away in handcuffs, his once smooth face now pale and contorted with anger. His empire, built on lies and stolen idealism, crumbled. Frank Dixon, along with a host of other implicated individuals, faced their own legal consequences. The Blue Earth Foundation, its noble mission irreparably tarnished, was dissolved, its remaining assets frozen as federal investigations began. Sarah was heartbroken, not just sad, but fundamentally broken. Her life's passion, the Clean Rivers Project, the cause she'd poured her heart into, was exposed as a cruel sham, a meticulously crafted illusion designed to line Victor's pockets. She withdrew, a quiet, shell-shocked figure in our once lively home. The betrayal from Victor was a gaping wound, but beneath it, a more insidious pain festered. My own deception. I tried to explain, tried to justify my actions. "Sarah, I did it to protect you," I said, my voice heavy with exhaustion. to protect your work, your reputation, everything you believed in. If I had told you earlier, he would have found a way to silence us both. It had to be surgical. She listened, her eyes distant, fixed on some unseen point beyond me. Protect me? She whispered, her voice raw. By letting me be a puppet? By letting me pour my heart into something rotten while you knew? You let me believe in a lie for months, Dale. The words hung in the air, heavy and true. The deception, however necessary I believed it to be, had created a significant, painful wedge between us. Her trust, once absolute, was now fractured, perhaps irrevocably. In the midst of the fallout, there was one small, clear win. Dr. Anna Davis and Aqua Vitas, now free from Victor's shadow, quickly gained recognition. Her technology, superior and honest, found new, legitimate partners eager to genuinely make a difference. She sent me a quiet email, a simple, "Thank you, Dale." It was a small comfort, a reminder that some good had come from the wreckage. I sat in my office late at night, the city lights blurring outside my window, and reflected on the moral cost of my surgical revenge. Justice had been served. Victor was exposed, his corruption laid bare, but the personal price was immeasurable. I had achieved my goal, but the cost was Sarah's vibrant idealism, her unquestioning belief in the good of people, and the immediate, fragile trust in our marriage. The silence between us at home was heavier than any spoken argument. Sarah began a slow, agonizing healing process. She spent hours walking by the river, not seeing its potential for cleanliness, but its current state as a metaphor for the corruption she had inadvertently championed. She was forced to confront her own naive trust, her optimistic view of human nature, and the cold, dark underbelly of ambition and greed. It was a painful education one she hadn't asked for. Dale and Sarah. We faced an uncertain future, our relationship strained, forever altered by the events that had unfolded. The house felt too big, too quiet. The trust, once a solid foundation, was now riddled with cracks. Justice, I understood then, while necessary, often comes with an enduring toll on the human spirit and the bonds we hold dear. Some scars never truly fade. The silence in our home stretched, thin and brittle, in the weeks that followed. Victor Harding's name became a stain on every news cycle. His philanthropic facade shattered. The foundation, Sarah's lifeblood, was gone, its good intentions drowned in a sea of his lies. She moved through the days like a ghost, her spirit dimmed, her belief in anything pure broken. I watched her, helpless, the architect of her pain, even if it was for a larger good. I delivered justice in my own cold, calculated way. Victor was paying his price. Frank Dixon and the others would pay theirs. Anna Davis's technology would finally find its true purpose, but the victory felt hollow. My surgical revenge had carved a wound in Sarah, and by extension, in us. Her eyes, when they met mine, held a quiet accusation, a lingering question of why I had let her live in that false light for so long. She was starting to heal, I knew, learning to navigate the world with a new, harder edge, a painful wisdom. But the shadow of what I'd done, the deliberate deception, lay between us like an invisible wall. The future was unwritten, but one thing was clear. The cost of truth sometimes is everything you thought you had.